Thank you very much. It's going to be a very important session because it's going to give us a lot of ideas with respect to how we are going to engineer the economy, first out of the pandemic crisis, and later how to engineer the economy to a more sustainable long-term growth in the years to come. As mentioned by the previous moderator, we have very good speakers today. We have some very good speakers, and the topic is going to be the changing drivers of economic growth. In the past, we used to talk about manufacturing, we used to talk about productivity, and also other dimensions like human resource development. But today, we are going to see some potential new sources of economic growth. We're talking about digital economy, and we're talking about talent management, and what are the other areas that can help promote new drivers of economic growth. We have very good speakers today. We have some Mama Azmi from InvestKL. We have Dzuleira. We have Shareen. We have Dato Shamsuddin Bardan from them. So they are very competent. We have they are very specialized and they're very competent and they're very experienced too. Let me just say a few words. We lost something about 5%, 5 to 6% of economic growth in the last year, in 2020. And this year also we're going to be equally affected. I'm not sure whether we are going to experience a rapid recovery. The government is working very hard, but the challenges are quite substantial, quite sizable. First, in terms of the public health problem. Secondly, in terms of the economic slowdown, economic recession. And thirdly, the political factor. But we are not going to touch on political factor. We are not competent politicians, so we are not going to touch on political factor today. So that's number one. Number two, the long-term problem of the economy, for example, issue of productivity. People are saying that our labor force are not as productive as the other countries, Singapore and South Korea, that sort of thing. And then also, we are saddled with a lot of concentration of labor-intensive industries, foreign workers, low skill or semi-skilled at about best, and how we're going to restructure, re-engineer the economy so that other ways of production, such as mechanization, automation, computerization, digital economy, that sort of thing, can be the new engine of economic growth that will bring us to a new set of industries that will facilitate upskilling of our workforce, upscaling in terms of our technology, that sort of thing, more capital intensive. So with that remark, I don't take much our time. We have just about an hour. There are about 4 speakers. It's better that we listen to them now. So for a start, let me just, first round, I will invite all the 4 to speak one by one. And then later from there, we take up from some specific issues. And the third round, we'll be talking about the public policy. What you want the government to do to assist these processes. I hope the speakers agree with me. Let me now invite first Azmi, Mama Azmi from InvestKL to make his presentation. Azmi, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. Thank you, Tan Sri Sulaiman Mahbob. Fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Briefly, I'd like to share what we do in InvestKL, that is to focus on investments that are very much in the Greater Kuala Lumpur region. The focus is to attract high value, high tech and high impact investments. The pandemic situation today certainly poses a situation where it is a great reset to the economy. And a great reset to the economy is for Malaysia to also be moving away from our traditional investments and traditional activities into high-value services where we see some encouraging investments. In the past 9 years, we are seeing a steady growth of our regional hubs being set up in Kuala Lumpur. That brings a number of activities. First and foremost, with this kind of activities, it certainly creates a positive spillover to the economy, both on the sector of the both on the private sector as well as the opportunities in working with small and medium enterprises. Number two, the demands for talent would be very different for regional type activities, and these are some of the people that are at the higher echelons of their organizations, and this is something positive that we are seeing. Number three, a continued as well as an increased urgency towards investments in the digital space. And we are talking about big data, analytics, and AI, where we are seeing companies across many industries, new and old, that are investing in this particular space. And this is something that we have been progressing well from that perspective. The opportunities would be towards a number of initiatives then. This is looking at the future where we wanted to also ensure that the investments are not investment per se, that the investments need to also collaborate and to form collaborations. We are talking about collaborations with universities, looking at innovation, looking at R&D activities, and looking at how they can also work with our small medium enterprises, and most importantly, bringing everybody up the value chain of activities, from adopting some of the newer technologies, the 4IR or Industry 4.0 revolution. That's a key aspect of this activity as well, to put together some of these very key industries as well as activities to come up and to be also part of the industry revolution. What's encouraging is we are seeing a consistent investment despite the current challenges of the pandemic. Malaysia has established its position as a location that has a mature working culture, very professional, and we are seeing positive momentum of companies setting up from Americas, from Europe, as well as from Asia. And all this is backed by the technology and the infrastructure that's available in Malaysia. Notably, our competition here is called Singapore as well as Hong Kong, where the more traditional hubs are. And this is where we have seen opportunities are coming in, where even companies are relocating from these two traditional locations into Kuala Lumpur. And the benefits are not just for Kuala Lumpur. We are seeing the expansion plans, the setting up of subsidiaries as well as branch offices of these large multinationals all across Malaysia. And looking at the current situation, certainly it's a prolonged pandemic at the moment. We are almost 1.5 years to walk throughout the pandemic. But most importantly, these are players as part of the global value chain. When we facilitate this part of the investors, and some of the good facilitation came from KPDN HAP, thank you, Minister, where we are seeing the type of support that we are getting. It's not just about facilitating the investors, it's also facilitating the ecosystem around them. And we remember that we had to also ensure more than 2,000 of Malaysian SMEs have to operate around these MNCs and be able to operate within this essential services activity. And this is very critical as part of the global value chain. So looking at those particular perspectives in play, certainly there are changing drivers of the economic growth today, with technology in place, with the new norm, or with the new normal that will be brought in by the pandemic, and how companies will be able to adopt and adapt to the situation. And that's something that I'd like to share in the first round, Azmi. Thank you.
I also like to welcome the presence of Datuk Seri, the Minister, who has made his remark just now. Very good remark. Yang Mak Menteri, I was once KSU of Domestic Trade too. I'm very proud of the Ministry. I'm very proud of what you have done. Including the setting up of the MIPO and SSM, that sort of thing, under Tan Sri Muhyiddin. I also like to acknowledge President Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar. I thought you cannot spare the time just now, both of you, but I'm glad that you're on. Okay, thank you, Azmi. Let me now invite our next speaker, Cik Dzuleira Abu Bakar. I think your background is already mentioned in the flyers. Okay, thank you. Please.
Yes, thank you, Tan Sri. Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Thank you for having me here today at this summit. Of course, it's an honor to be here in the presence of Tan Sri Wahid, YB Minister, KPDN, HEP, and my fellow panel member speakers. It's definitely a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having me. So a bit of an introduction. I currently am the CEO of the Technology Park Malaysia. I recently got on the job 2 months ago, which is part of MOSI's bigger plan of consolidation of agencies. So we are working on a new mandate called the Technology Commercialization Accelerator. Some PR is out, but we will be making more announcements soon. Inshallah, work is on the way. So what we're actually working on is a bigger initiative as far as technology commercialization is concerned for the country. So we are looking at consolidation of 2 agencies, which is MAGIC, the agency that I previously headed, as well as TPM. So stay tuned, lots coming up. Now, as far as our discussion here today, I think COVID, new norm, is really what we speak about every day. But I think what I remind myself and I remind everyone that I speak to is that the new norm is enabled by technology. Right? Technology, automation, digitalization is really what has enabled the new norm today. And I think it's very, very important to understand where we are today and what else we need to improve in order to continue to strive to better the economy and to actually take us forward from this economic state that we are right now. Of course, with the health crisis that we're in, the whole support to actually get us out of this situation is well underway, well within the ministry that I'm currently reporting as well, which is MOSI. I think happy to report that our daily vaccination rates have actually exceeded 400,000 semalam, yesterday. So I think this is fantastic news. We are right now on track to hitting 70% of population to be vaccinated by October. Yeah, our daily vaccination rate, in fact, kita dah sampai 3.6. Sorry, daily vaccination rate is about 400,000. We have close to 11.7 million doses administered to date, and we have 3.6 million completed vaccination to date. So I think that's a very encouraging number. Of course, this is may not be the updated number, but what remains is that we have exceeded 400,000 in terms of daily vaccination rate. I think this really sets the tone in terms of economic recovery, opening up of economic sectors, which is very, very critical for us to get back on our feet. I think the speaker before me mentioned very clearly about the role of SMEs, the role of enterprises to stimulate the economy further. And there's no two way about it. Reopening the economy is the way forward towards stimulating the economy and economic growth. We've seen reduction in economic growth in the last quarters. Inshallah, I'm very confident and I'm very positive that we will rebound. But of course, I think moving forward is how do we live with this new normal? I think we have also seen that COVID is probably here to stay. Vaccination keeps the situation under control, but it does not, preclude us from not being infected by COVID-19. So we have to find a way to live within the pandemic. That's definitely a given. So I think it's very important to understand the role, I think from my perspective at least, and from the work that we do on a daily basis, is trying to understand what levers of economy that the technology can actually influence. And we continue that work on a daily basis. We work with the private sector, we work with the government, and we also work with the grassroots entrepreneurs. Right? I think the other key thing that we need to look at is how do we actually transform Malaysia into a technology producer nation more than anything else, as opposed to relying on technology from other countries, international technology. I think we have all the capabilities that is necessary within the country. We have sufficient talent pool. We just need to identify what the gaps are to build capacity that's necessary. We have, and I keep saying this, we have a necessary population to test and validate a product, right? We have 30 over million population in Malaysia in itself. We have a sweet spot between the mammoth that you have in Indonesia and the and the smaller population base that we have in Singapore, right? We're right smack in between, and that's really the sweet spot for us to test and try and validate our technology. And I think it also makes Malaysia very, very attractive to the international market. I think there's a lot for us to play on and to sort of expand on in that sense. So yeah, I think I want to just start my part or my pitch to this session with that note, and I'm happy to be part of the discussions in this panel, of course, by our fellow panel members as well as Tan Sri. I know our fellow members come from diverse backgrounds, and I'm very excited to see the perspectives and the insights that would come through this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dzuleira. Very good introduction on the role of technology, and I'm quite happy to hear that you're very positive on the that Malaysia can position itself to enhance the role of technology and absorption by our enterprises, including SMEs mentioned by the Menteri just now. So and also you mentioned the important role of talent. So it's just nice that our next speaker, Puan Shareen Abdul Ghani, will elaborate on the role of talent management in order to support our economic growth, particularly as a driver of economic growth, talent management. Okay, Puan Shareen Abdul Ghani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon, YB. Thank you for your notes earlier, the keynote speech, very enlightening, and I'm very heartening that you are looking at recovery. Tan Sri Wahid, my former boss, while I was in Talent Corp, thank you for listening. No pressure. And of course, fellow panelists. The topic of talent is always this question of demand and supply. It moves between those two, right? So when we look at talent and talent management and talent development, talent policies, talent strategies, it is defined by the economic drivers that we have in the country. So we have a strong demand for certain sectors that require certain skill sets and all that. The supply has got a better sort of structure to move towards and really meet that gap. I also wanted to we'll expand on that later throughout the session. But I wanted to also recap that, the recent report, this is a global report that talks about the trends in 2021, capturing what's happened to us throughout the pandemic and the transformation of workforce, the workplace, and also the work itself. So we all know this, the flexible work way of doing our day-to-day responsibilities have become the norm now. People are getting used to using, different platforms to work, to engage in opportunities, to look at new opportunities, and the technology innovation in that space is very active. The other part that we also looked at in this study that I saw is that a lot of the workforce now are feeling the pressures of having to work online or having to work remote. Although we say flexible work is a good thing because people have, they can blend their personal life and their work, but there are a lot of pressures that people are facing. So well-being is another big trend that we're looking at. How do we ensure that our workforce are competent, they have the right skills, but they also, their survival or their resilience is well taken care of. And in this study, it's very surprising that, when they looked at the different groups of people in the workforce, the leaders are thriving better than the rest of the workforce. So we need to pay some attention to that as well, because I think 61%. This global research indicated that 61% of the leaders are thriving, but there's only 40% of the rest of the workers who are not. So we have to look at different strategies to ensure that the WellCare, because when WellCare is part and parcel of the talent development, then productivity increases. I like what Azmi is saying. Productivity is also collaboration. We should also look at how we collaborate and increase productivity. And of course, Dzuleira's point about technology and how we leverage on the technology. So those are the two key points that I wanted to say, at least at this stage of our introduction. And I'm happy to hear more. Thank you, Tan Sri. Over to you.
Thank you, Puan Shareen. Yes, you touched a very important point. Namely, first is a question of talent management, creating talent pool in the country, and thirdly, the concern for well-being, concern for our own health as a whole, particularly to face the challenges of adjustment, first in the context of COVID, and second in the context of our rapid economic growth, the past few years, excepting the last year and this year. So this is an important point which you can take up later. Let's listen to our fourth panel member, namely Datuk Shamsuddin Bardan. He's not new to our corporate sector, having been involved in Malaysian Employers Federation for many, many years. I know him for so long too. So let's listen to Datuk Shamsuddin Bardan. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Terima kasih, Tan Sri. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon to all the participants and also the fellow panelists. Tan Sri did mention in your opening remarks to actually talk about presence of, I would say, many unskilled foreign labor, thing like that. And of course, that is a concern. But let us be fair to us as employers on this particular subject, because if we look back, way back before we implemented minimum wages, we have more than 2.5 million legal foreign workers at that time. And of course, if you actually look at the figures now, it is something like 1.7 million. So I would say, yes, there is a reduction in the number of foreign workers in the country. And I would say that there is a willingness on the part of industries to actually relook at the way they do things and perhaps, engage more local workers to actually get things done at the company's level. Yeah, so of course, this is, if you look back at the intention of the government at that time to introduce minimum wages, is to reduce our reliance on foreign workers. And I would say that, yes, whatever we have currently as far as numbers are concerned, it is still well within the kind of quota or limit as set by the 11 and also 12 Malaysia plan kind of thing. Not more than 50% of the labor force is coming from foreign workers. But of course, yes, the government in the stimulus packages had introduced what they call it as nationalization. But of course, this is also really a challenge to the employers community, because it's not going to be easy for us to really just, attract local workers to do the work that are being formerly being done by the foreign workers. Of course, there is a need for us really within the employees community, and of course, with a lot of assistance from the government to actually introduce and modernize the job itself. Yeah? When I say we are trying to modernize the job, of course, if say, for example, just the example as a security guard, as it is now, I would say that very few locals would want to work as security guard. Yeah? But the fact remains that if you look at the GLCs, the way they man their security services is basically they are not using security guard as security guard, but they are using what they call it as auxiliary police. And these are, I would say, stiffied police assistants that are being trained by the police authorities, and they are given a certificate. Yeah, and of course, they also can handle firearms. And when I talk with all these companies that engage auxiliary police in terms of their cost of wages and cost of employing these auxiliary police, I mean, the cost is quite similar to that of engaging foreign workers. So basically, of course, if you look at the auxiliary police, all of them are local employees. Yeah? So in this way, I would say that if we are able to actually use all our companies or our employers to use auxiliary police to beef up their security services, I would say that there is no need for us to rely on, say, for example, currently there are close to 100,000 security guards in the country. So I would say that this is really upgrading the profession itself. And of course, this is what we call it as part of rebranding, and it's very critical for us to do that. And of course, I would say that there is a need for a lot of training and retraining and rebranding for us to actually encourage more locals to take up jobs that are currently or previously being shunned away by the locals, because not so much of wages basically, but this is more of the social stigma attached to people working in certain categories and industries, things like that. And of course, the other part is basically when you talk about the current labor market, of course, the pandemic that we are in currently, of course, is not really, friendly to the labor market, in the sense that many people lost their job. Last year alone, I think we're talking about more than 107,000 people lost their job. And of course, this year, if you're looking up to the current figures, slightly more than 30,000 already lost their job. Yeah, and of course, what is also critical is for us to look at the unemployment rate. Yeah? We used to be having unemployment of less than 4%. And that is critical in the sense that we talk about employment which is unemployment which is less than percent. So the country is considered to have what we call it as full employment. But with the current situation, of course, the unemployment rate is more than 4%, 4.3%, 4.4%. And what is also really alarming is the fact that the unemployment among youth, when I say youth here, is more like people in the age group of 15 to 24. It is more like 12%. And this, I think, is something that I think we really need to do a lot of thinking back and see how these people really can be assisted and be absorbed into work environment. But the problem really is basically now most employers are having this, what they call it as employment freeze. But the government also had introduced, I would say, a lot of incentives to encourage employers to employ these unemployed people. And of course, one of the major things now is that when you talk about employment relationship, the capability of employers to offer permanent employment is actually very much challenged. If at all employers do offer employment to prospective job seekers now, it is more on shorter term contract. Yeah, of course, this is a very sensitive issue because of recent development in the medical field, where people have been put so long on what they call it as fixed term contract, more than 6 years kind of thing. But that is the reality now in the private sector, But of course, the problem is that some of the job seekers are not keen to accept any offer of jobs that are not considered as permanent. Because to them, they say that they want to have permanent employment, more job security, thing like that. But to me, it's basically for this first time, people who are entering the job market, it's best for them to grab this opportunity, even if the offer is for shorter term contract, and even if the wages is not that attractive, because this is basically should be used as a stepping stone for them to develop their career later on. And I would say that once you actually enroll yourself into workplace environment, it would be much easier for you to find a job later on. Perhaps, Tan Sri, I would like to just stop here for the time being. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Datuk Shamsuddin. It was good perspective from the Employers Federation. Particularly, you're talking about the skill upgrading, as an example, the security sector, from a typical traditional way, but moving towards an auxiliary police kind of thing. So this is very important. But let me come back to you, although you have finished your turn, Datuk. What about traditional sector like the agriculture? Because this is related to issue of food security. We have a minister from domestic trade here who is from Sarawak. Maybe you want to know how can we facilitate transformation in the food sector, particularly agriculture. So far have been left behind. There are a lot of rural people. And agriculture in many of the previous crises, Datuk Sri Alexander, it was a buffer kind of sector. People run back the moment they are unemployed, they are retrenched, they come back to agriculture. So it gives a buffer, and it's very important not only in terms of food supply, but in terms of source of income in the rural areas, in the areas close by to urban centers like Kuala Lumpur. People go back to Malacca or Negeri Sembilan to tap, for example, on the weekend to beef up the income. It's very important. So maybe other places too. Let me try Dato Shamsuddin. You wanted to talk about this when I met some time ago. Dato Shamsuddin, I give you the opportunity again.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tan Sri. Of course, this is, I think, a very critical factor because somehow, whether there is pandemic or no pandemic, whether there is work or no work, we still need to put food on the table. And of course, agriculture is, I would say, very important. And I think currently we spend a lot of money importing our food needs. Yeah? And I think we should actually be modernizing this particular sector. Many countries now talks about modern farming, vertical farming, even in buildings, in things like that. And of course, I'm very much encouraged recently when I read the news to say that, people who are homeless are being encouraged to do farming in the city. And that is, I think, is very, very important. I think little things like that should be encouraged. Now, of course, previously, during the good old days, we used to still have what we call it as the Green Book. And I would say that should be revived. That should be actually encouraged now, especially now when you're staying at home and we do have a lot of spare time. And I think farming at home can be actually meeting some of your requirements. Yeah? And of course, I think this is very important. But of course, marketing can be very, very critical here. But if you look at the first MCO that we had last time, when the government actually announced a lockdown in the first MCO, then the farmers in Cameron were not able to sell their produce to the pasar borong, thing like that. But eventually the platform, online marketeers actually came to their assistance, and within 1 to 2 days, their products are already, be sold online. And that, I think, is part of the critical transformation that I think we need to say that, yes, these are the traditional sector, but we need to inject some kind of technology within the sector so that I think it is actually attractive to the young, especially for them to be involved in this traditional sector. So thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you. Terima kasih, Dato' Shamsuddin. I like to exploit the advantage, as the chairman's position now, to take advantage of our minister here. Sorry, Dato' Sri Rizanda and Mr. Tan Sri Abdul Wahid. Good that you stay back. Would you like to comment on some of these big issues of digitalization, talent management, technology absorption, that sort of thing, and also upgrading of skill at this point of time? I'd like to invite Yang Boman, because it's very important. You are a center of a very important ministry, domestic trade. Otherwise, it should be called Ministry of Commerce. Very important. Yeah. And regulations are, many regulations there.
No doubt we have to embrace the technology. As I mentioned earlier on in my presentations, that we are already introducing what we call REDI, REDI, to facilitate even the smallest hawkers, if you like. So no doubt we are fully recognizing the importance of the applications of digitalizations in the domestic trade. Yes. Yeah, I'm also attracted to what's been discussed earlier on the socio-economic well-being of our people. So one experience that I've gone through that I can see should be able to facilitate our rural communities is that they are capable of producing, but the problem is it has always been there that even though we had pharma and various other organizations as such, that is in the marketing. That is why now I'm very excited about this hypermarket from Middle East, Lok Lok, but I used to call it Lulu, but the Prime Minister corrected me and said, Alex, it's pronounced as Lok Lok. And in Arab, he said he was the one who brought them in when he was the minister here.
Yes,
Yeah,
I was the KSU then.
that's right. Yeah, I know that. Yeah. So I realized that, sir, right now, Lolo have 300 what we call SKU, a stock keeping unit, meaning to say products from our pengusaha, small enterprises that being now brought through the Lolo network back to overseas. They have about 192 outlets throughout Middle East, Europe, even I heard in the US and also in our African Muslim countries. So I see this is an opportunity to assist our people who are in the rural. Even just now I heard this mentioned that people are now also planting in buildings, some using technologies. So it's always a question of marketing. So I believe that if we can latch on to these opportunities open through this getting connected through supermarkets a network like Lok, I think we will have a bigger global, if you like, level, what do you call that, market that we can take advantage of. I'm convincing the Minister of Rural Development in Sarawak, who used to be in the federal government, Dato Ahmad Douglas Sugar. I think Tasri Wahid would know him. Yeah, he is over there now, and we are working closely how to assist our rural communities out there once we are able to maybe formalize a bit more on the network. So that would be empowering our people. Yeah, thank you.
To see one day, I think we'll be happy to see farmers from Kundasang supplying fresh vegetables, fresh flowers to places in London.
Yeah, it is already happening already, Tan Sri. Yeah,
I'm very sorry. Nice to hear that. I'm going to let Tan Sri Abdul keeping quiet there. I welcome your intervention, Tan Sri, please.
Well, thank you, Tan Sri Moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon, everyone. Maybe I can make two comments. One is actually on infrastructure. The other one is on platforms. On infrastructure, I've been a great proponent of the government and MCMC utilizing the huge USP fund, the Universal Services Provision Fund. And I think, alhamdulillah, with Jendela, a big chunk of that fund will be used to roll out infrastructure across the country. And I know there's a strong emphasis on 5G, but I've always said, look, you better get the 4G rolled out nationwide. And alhamdulillah, under the Jendela program, 97% of Malaysian soil will be covered by at least 4G. And I think that's actually great news. And that will enable most rural areas to also be covered. And hopefully, what we experienced with Azmi early on with connectivity and so on will be a thing of the past soon. Now, secondly, on applications, on platforms. Now, I think it's great that we have all these platforms that are enabling more businessmen, the sharing economy and so on, and at the same time providing greater access to the consumers as well. So I think it's great. My beef in the past has been about the cost of it. So for example, if I'm a small restaurant owner, I need to have access onto the digital platform of some of these food operators and so on. I have to sacrifice 30%. If I'm a hotel operator, for example, I'm already struggling getting my occupancy rates up with my investments. I'm hardly making money, but for every room that I sell, I have to pay 16, 17, 18% to the OTAs, which is disproportionate to the effort which I've thought. So I think we do need to have more and more platforms being made available so that many of these small time players, traders and so on, will be able to have access to the platform at a much more reasonable cost. How much is that? Well, it depends on the market, but to me, if it's like a ride-sharing, let's say a vehicle perspective, my view is actually probably 10, 15% max will be not unreasonable instead of 25%, if I may. In the case of OTAs, maybe 5% is appropriate. instead of 16%, 17%, 18%. If it's restaurants, for example, maybe again the 5, maximum 10%, so that you can share that economic cake to the restaurant owners better. So in that respect, I do welcome efforts by others like Maybank, for example. They just come up with the Sama-Sama Local platform, which is currently provided free for the small SMEs businesses to put their business onto that platform. So I do hope there'll be more and more of these providers. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Good, very good intervention by our distinguished participants this afternoon. Moving forward, if you don't mind, I'd like to invite our speakers, panel members again to give the second round. Maybe we would like to focus how. You may have a lot of ideas, but it's as to how we should do to move forward, for example, to enhance collaboration so that within our industries, so that they can absorb greater technology. How can we enhance greater talent among our people, our workers, and then also how can we facilitate further adjustment in terms of digitalization, in terms of automation kind of thing. The idea is how to move from SMEs, Yang YB, Datuk Sri Alexander, and Sultan, how to move from SMEs to move into mid-tier companies so that they can move forward into big companies later. So, the structure for industrialization in the country is two, YB. One is that a lot of concentration on MNCs on one hand, and the other one SMEs. We got to create a sector in between, the mid-tier companies, where technology can be readily absorbed and they can be moving towards export orientation. At the same time, can support growth SMEs. So these are the things that we should be thinking in terms of mid-term growth, 3 years to 5 years. Grow the mid-tier companies. I hope you are in the cabinet may take up later with Azmi on this, But let me invite Azmi from the InvestKL to pick up on this point or to elaborate his further earlier point. Azmi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Looking at the future and with planning towards post-pandemic, we need to reinvent how we do business. Let's say from our perspective, to start at the top is to look at how can we attract investments, not just current investments, but future type investments. And future type investments would be different. Today, the team lines would be about environmental, social governance. Today is about looking at digital activities that many of the panelists are talking about in that particular perspective. So there needs to be a reinvent on how we incentivize the investments. It may not necessarily be fiscal incentives. We should focus on non-fiscal incentives. And non-fiscal is about ease of doing business. Ease of doing business in how a company comes in, how they set up their activities, in the basic thing of opening a bank account. And this is about attracting and really facilitating that. Digital would close the gap in all of these activities moving forward. Now, when we have brought in the investments, we incentivize them the correct way, fiscal and non-fiscal. It's about building collaboration. We have very good small, medium enterprises, and we have good collaborators within the universities. If we realize it or not, in KL alone, there are more than 40 public and private institutions of higher learning. And we have seen positive collaborations by our MNCs, comes from many parts of the world, in wanting to work with these universities. Looking at that particular model also, Tan Sri, just picking up on the point about mid-tier companies. Yes, there will be a good platform to create or to leverage on creating those companies. But we may also want to look at what a popular statement in Europe would be. In Europe, there are many companies that are called hidden champions. They are small, medium, but they are leading in the world in many parts of activities, say in technology, in processes, in business, and so on. And until today, after 5 generations, they are still privately owned. So perhaps in Malaysia, it's nothing wrong being with in that particular model, but the need to move forward or to move up the value chain would need to be in a collaboration with large companies, medium, small enterprises, as well as bringing in universities to create all that platform together. And I would imagine moving forward, the topics of ESG as well as digital would be the enablers towards all these activities. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you very much. You got a very important point. One is to strengthen our non-fiscal incentives. We have basically how to enhance the ease of doing business. I remember in the government, we established the Pemuda some time back. I was involved in, as DGP was involved in it very much. We cut a lot of processes. So I think there should be another round of how to look at how to cut doing business. Let me invite Dzuleira to amplify on her proposals now to enhance the use of technology and maybe relate to greater digitalization absorption by all our enterprises.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Maybe I can just start by making reference to, again, technology and innovation. I think the important thing that we need to understand at the end of the day, technology and innovation is actually a tool to provide access. And I think going back to all that the speakers mentioned earlier, as well as what was mentioned by Tan Sri Wahid, which was a very, very important point that he raised, as always, around infrastructure, right? Infrastructure. Again, technology plays a very important role in providing that infrastructure more than anything else, because it's actually the bridge that takes a product to market, and it's done through technology, right? Technology and innovation can provide that access. And I think a very important point that he also touched is about, if you're talking about trade enablement, it's really about connectivity. And the entire economy in the last 1.5 years has been enabled by platforms, by e-commerce. And at the back of it is really connection of, at the back of that is really connectivity, the strength of our internet. And before we start talking about 5G, I think, as Tan Sri rightly mentioned, we have to really ensure that we have 3G and 4G rolled out in key areas to enable this trade. 5G is really the future that we want to work towards, but it's the present that's really important right now. So yes, infrastructure is definitely a key issue here that we need to look at. And this is where technology plays a very, very important role. And I think the other thing is also the need to move up the value chain through technology and digitalization. And this cuts across many key industries that are actually holding the economy up. You talk about agriculture, you talk about manufacturing. And I think in the last 1.5 years, we have just been forced to take this route. Some may have been ready, some were forced in that direction, and some are still grappling even after 1.5 years. So I think this is where, as an industry or from the government's perspective, I think it's a very important area for us to continue to incentivize to use technology and innovation to incentivize the importance of technology and innovation. And I'm also thinking that perhaps this is also an opportunity for us to introduce more trade policies that are related to opening up technology and innovation to companies. Incentives to allow companies to actually onboard technology. Again, going back to the very important point that Tan Sri Wahid raised, is the cost. See, yes, cost of application getting on e-commerce it's really a hindering factor right now. But if you look at it at a larger scale, for SMEs to actually move up the value chain, they need to onboard technology. Not just about platform, it's just about core technology, and core technology is costly, right? And it takes a lot of migration from manual systems to automated systems, and that bridge in between will be costly, and in turn will raise cost of operations. So we have to actually balance, how do we actually introduce technology and innovation into SMEs, but at the same time enabling them to keep their operating costs low, because ultimately for businesses, what matters is really their margins. If technology is going to eat up into their margins, then they don't see sense in onboarding technology. This is where we see the sort of reluctance, right? So I think from a government's perspective, again, YB, KPD and HGP, Dato CEO also on this session with us. I think it's very important that we look at it as a total effort in terms of facilitating trade and business in that sense. So that's definitely one. And I like the fact that Azmi spoke about hidden companies. Right? These are companies with a lot of talent, a lot of potential, but need the right push to take them to the next stage. And this is where I think the government plays a very important role to provide the necessary push, but at the same time not get in their way. I think the other thing that I also want to highlight is the fact that there are multiple challenges, seen and unseen, for companies to actually progress or get to market access, for example. One is, of course, the technology onboarding, costs associated to it, but there are also several regulations as well as and as laws that are preventing these things. So I think it's also important for us to look at that in terms of how do we facilitate business whilst looking at enabling them without, without getting the laws and regulations in their way. So I think there's just multiple angles to it to piece everything together to actually allow these companies to grow. Because I think it's also unfair to tell these companies that, oh, you know what, you have to onboard technology, but there are a lot of other challenges that they need to sort of encounter before they can take on technology. And investment, of course, plays a very, very important role. And going back to the fact that having the strength of creating and inventing or being a pioneer in certain technology areas plays an important role, right? It obviously brings down the cost of patent, the cost of licensing some technology because it is owned by the country, owned by us. So yes, so ultimately it's really an entire ecosystem or industry that we have to look to influence, from the supply to the value chain, to the technology source, to the talent, to the market. So everything needs to be pieced in together. And again, there are challenges in piecing everything together, including the industry. So again, maybe just to share a little bit of work that we do in my previous capacity in Magic, I think one important thing that we emphasize is building linkages between industries, between the bigger industries, bigger companies, as well as the technology origins or the startup founders, so to speak, right? Because there is a gap between where they are and where the bigger companies are. So what we do is we try and provide that linkage. And through that linkage, they would either be enabled throughout their journey or to be able to even provide services to this market at large, because market access, that bridge in between sebenarnya has to be there. And right now, I think more and more entities are playing that role. We need to expand on that.
Yeah.
And the government is also playing a great role in that sense. So with that, I think that's pretty much from my part.
Sorry, thank you. I'm sorry to cut you there, Dzuleira. The point is that I
was already ending. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for elaboration on several points there, especially on the part of the ecosystem to set up the whole entire value chain. Let me invite Shareen. You have chance to develop further on your capital, on your talent management.
Thank you, Tan Sri. I think listening to all the views around the virtual room, sometimes we talk about infrastructure, we talk about financial capital. We need to talk a lot more about the human capital, because at the end of the day, when you look at the growth of economies, the economic growth and all that, it's actually driven by the people that you have in your country, in your businesses, in your organizations, in your communities. How do we look at strategies? Because now the way the technology is moving, the workplace is transforming at a very rapid pace. And the term is that talent is everywhere in a hybrid, interconnected world. So how do we position ourselves to have the access to the best talent to grow our economic investments? Because that's where you're going to find the transformational change. I think companies need to look at investing a lot more in developing their talent. I have a very unique vantage point. I was in a GLC, a GLIC in Kazana, and then went into government, and now I'm an entrepreneur looking at technology solutions for talent. There is, like Dzuleira says, there is a bridge there, but sometimes the bridge leads to nowhere, or rather the bridge is, is broken. So who needs to play that role to be that connector? I think it's all stakeholders. It's the private sector, obviously, government with the right of policies to facilitate, and then looking at all these hidden gems that needs that kind of push. So with technology, with the kind of talent that we have here, and now because people cannot get out of the country, we actually have them kind of in the country to leverage on. But unfortunately, there's not a concerted effort to actually see where are the best brains that can do different things to spur this kind of economic growth. If we're going to go into traditional, sectors like agriculture that you said, where are all the best brains that are looking at agriculture, looking at supply chain, looking at mobilization, using technology and efficiency as their core offering? New sectors, we need to grow. Earlier in the panel, and Tan Sri Wahid gave the keynote about sustainability, your next growth drivers, your economic sector in the space of green economy, if you want to call it that. Where are all the jobs that's going to move the economic investment, and what kind of skill sets do we need to develop? So at the moment in the country, we don't really see a very coherent picture of where the economic drivers are and what are some of the investments that we need to make in our people so that we're skilled for the right kind of jobs. We can't just do reskilling for the sake of reskilling. We got to skill for the right kind of jobs, the right kind of sectors that's going to grow, and the drivers and the demand is going to then define what kind of skill sets we have with our human capital. So there is this big thing that we need to think about as a multi-stakeholder kind of approach, and really look at very, very targeted economic drivers that's going to take us forward, and what kind of skills and what kind of people do we need to drive it, because at the end of the day, it's about human capital.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shareen. As chairman of MER, you give me a lot of ideas to do some research, do it to the government, and to the, I can see that Seri nodding his head. But let's welcome another round from Dato Shamsuddin Bardan. Dato?
Ya, terima kasih Tan Sri. Of course, we have been talking a lot about technology, things like that. But I think what is important also is that we also need to prepare the people, the talent that we have to manage the technology. And of course, sad to say that, we have a lot of issues with the attitude of our existing employees. They doesn't seem to love their job very much. And if there are issues with the company, they just say that if you want to sack me, you sack me and see you in court, kind of thing. And that kind of attitude is really not really the kind of attitude that we want to see within our own employees. And also, when we talk about trying to develop the right attitude, I believe it is very important for us to also relook at the way we do our internship program. And currently, of course, if you're looking at the internship program that we have, we only look at perhaps 6 months during the period of studies, normally done at the last part of their studies, things like that. But if you care to look at Japan, for example, the way they do their internship is very much structured and trying to develop the employee, or the student itself in trying to know the workplace. Of course, from the first year itself, they actually are sent to companies, they're sent to industries to do what? Is it to do something which is big? No, really. No, some of them are sent to just look after the cleanliness of the toilet. And this is where they actually they build up their attitude and aptitude, which is, I think, critical. And I think we should be also embarking on this kind of program to develop the attitude of our employees towards working like that. And also, of course, very, very important, that we need to actually relook at our environment of the way we manage our employees, the relationship that we have with our employees, things like that. And obviously, some of the major laws in the country are, I would say, the yesteryear's laws, and which are not really supportive of the current requirement. Now, if you look, say, for example, what happens during the pandemic is basically that we need to have a lot of flexibility in the way we manage our employees, the way the employees actually also work within the environment, thing like that. But unfortunately, of course, we have very rigid laws that doesn't support us in this kind of new environment. And I would say that there is a real need to relook at the way we do things. And sad part is basically, there are some reports to say that in terms of wage payment, our laws is actually very, very complicated, second to Belgium in the world. Yeah? And we are actually the most difficult country to manage our wages payment. Of course, the top one is Belgium, we are number second, and we are number two. So these kind of issues, I think, need to be addressed. And of course, when we talk about working from home, ladies and gentlemen, currently when you work from home, of course, you work from everywhere. There is no specific place at your house that you call it as workstation. And it's very important for us to actually build up this culture about working from home, have a proper workstation so that everybody in the house knows that if you enter your workstation, then there should not be any disturbances from the family members, things like that. And also, very critical, because I saw in the Q&A, there is this question about we like to declare public holidays. Yeah? And of course, Malaysia have a fair bit of public holidays. If you're talking about Selangor, we have about 18, Sabah, Sarawak, possibly they have more than 20 public holidays. On top of that, of course, if we menang Asian Cup or thing like that, then kita declare holiday. Not realizing that actually it's very expensive for us to declare holiday. The cost, just wages cost, is about 1 billion ringgit for every declared public holiday. That is the basic cost. But if the company wish to operate on a public holiday, then that 1 billion is multiplied by 3, meaning 3 billion, that is the cost of the company. Obviously, this kind of thing cannot go on. And I think there is a need to look at those kind of environment. So thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Dato, Shamsuddin. Very nice input from the MEF. I see that. I think the discussion is very, very interesting, and we uncovered a lot of issues. I like the statement by Shareen, said that there appears to be no coherent picture of where the drivers of growth are. Well, I think it's challenging MEA to do it and charge Treasury for giving some money. Or Datuk Seri is under give us some money from your operating expenditure. We do the subject research for that. Time is not on our side. I'm told you're given only just 1 hour, just about 3:40 plus now. I must thank you. Thanks all the speaker, the panel members. They have done very, very well, rise up to the occasion. And certainly, I'm thankful to our distinguished participant, namely Datuk Sri Rizanda and Tan Sri Abdul Wahid for participating. I'm sorry I take advantage of both of you, but this is the privilege of being a chairman. we take advantage of it so that, we get a lot of ideas. And certainly for me as a chairman of MEA, this is a very good discussion. And as previous civil servant, general APU. So a lot of these things are important for long-term planning. So anyway, I wish you all the very best. Thank you, the KSI, in particular, my good friend Michael Yeo and Caroline for inviting us to participate. And thank you, Tan Sri, Datuk Sri Alexander and Tan Sri for staying by until the last minute of the function. And I thank you again for participating. Thank you.